So good morning, everybody. It's Steve Halkinaker. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are going to continue our exploration of learning models and how they overlay on the change grid and how they resonate with one another. Last time around we talked about the Gregoric concept, and for the most part, I think that it overlaid quite nicely. It still gave us cause for pause a couple of times and left us with a bit of a question mark. Hopefully, what we'll do today will bring that question mark more into the answer direction. And so today we're going to be looking at Herrmann brain dominance, so HBDI, probably one of the best known, best documented, and I'm going to say widely applied models. Is that fair to say? Those of you who are Herrmann brain dominance oriented. Yeah. So, and of course, there's a lot of different websites that are devoted to Herrmann's work, and lots and lots and lots of graphics and illustrations and explanations you can find on that. But that's Herrmann with two N's at the end, so Hermann. Now, Herrmann is looking a little bit more about how the brain operates. And so, Brian, are you familiar with the Herrmann brain dominance model?
I am not.
Well, Edie is. Who else on our call is also a Herrmann brain dominance person? Yeah, Edie.
Yeah, I am.
All right, so I'm going to give you my Reader's Digest condensed version explanation, and Edie, I'll rely upon you to fill in the blanks. And Brian, you can, you're our resident neuroscientist, and so maybe you can tell us what's really going on with it. But basically what Herrmann does is says that people have a preferred sort of a learning style that goes on, preferred ways of using their brain or whatever. And he says that it's divided between right and left brain work, but also upper and lower brain work. And so right and left, we know right's more on the creative side of things and left is more on the logical side of things. And then we know the upper brain is more about cortex functions and the lower brain is more about emotional sorts of functions. And so the Herrmann brain dominance model kind of helps you identify where you have a tendency to live as you are looking at things. So Edie, is that even close to being workable?
Yeah, I'm shopping, so I'm turning it off a lot, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, no worries, no worries. And so in that model, they would divide you into being 4 different versions of yourself. And those 4 selves are the rational self, the safekeeping self, the feeling self, and the experimental self. If we add that a little bit more about where it is, you could have it being upper right, upper left, lower right, lower left. And now we're looking a little bit more about what's going on with the thinking processes. Okay, so Brian, as someone who's new to this, is this at least starting to sound interesting?
It is. I wonder how old it is.
I don't exactly remember, but certainly within, well, Herrmann has passed away now. So I'm going to say probably, when do you think, Edie?
I know that when I was teaching at a community college in the 70s, I was communicating with him and General Electric was behind the money behind him. So I know in the 70s, it was well on its way.
All right. Okay, good, good, good. Then I think that's that kind of tells us it's been around for a good long while, and that now I'm going to slide something into the screen for just a second. I stumbled across this website, and stumbled is literally true. I wasn't looking for this, but college.cengage.com, college.cengage.com. And I'm trying to go, you have to go instructors, thinking styles, whatever. But it's going over a lot of different things about teaching learning models and the different learning models that you might find. But there are a lot of very interesting diagrams as we work our way down through this that I think I'll pull into play, because most of the things we're going to look at talk about what the learner expects but not what the learner struggles with. And as we go about trying to figure out if this overlays, how it overlays, where it overlays on the change grid, sometimes we have to look beyond the more positive performance behavioral sorts of stuff and ask the opposite. Well, if instead of looking at what they do well and what they prefer, what do they not do well and what do they not prefer? Okay. So I'll slide that out of the way, but I'll text that over to you guys. I'll probably can do that now. They made an improvement to go to meeting or go to webinar where I can now actually share documents. That is a new arrival on the scene there. Let's go ahead and click on chat. Slide this over here. Don't know why I just flipped.
So may I ask a quick question?
You can even ask a slow question.
Is this does his profile, is it like trying to say that you think dominantly out of one of those areas and only those areas? Is that
Oh, he would never say only those areas, but let's see if I can bring up for you guys. I should have uploaded mine, but if you take the HBDI assessment, you end up with this circumflex diagram. Circumplex diagram, and let me kind of bring one of those up.
And to answer Brian's question, 4% of the population is a perfect square. So you can have an equal amount, you know, some have a lot of everything and some have nothing of neither, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and I'm heavy in 2 of them and light in 2 of them. But if you start seeing these, like, that's a pretty close to a balance. Obviously, they're favoring the this analytical self or this rational self kind of side of things. And so, David, Brian, as you take the profile and you're answering all the questions and all that, they can end up mapping you to the diagram to see what's really going on. And so you can see where these percentages are and all that, but that's the map you end up with. So I don't think there's such a thing as someone who has 0 in any of these.
right? That's why I was asking, because
no.
really, like, even when they identify left brain versus right brain characteristics, the 2 are always working together. And
Yes.
it's really a myth to say like the left brain isn't creative. The left brain will be creative. It's just going to be very sequential in its creativeness. So,
Right.
you know, it's just going to have a certain way of going about creativity that's more limited than right brain.
Ryan, when they're using it for team building, the whole idea is that you bring the upper right brain people in a brainstorming group to get all the ideas, and you don't mix brainstorming with a lot of upper left brain people because they put a negative energy, they block the flow.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you go sequentially with people. And the interesting thing, in the entire world, there's almost a perfect balance of all 4 quadrants. And now, you know, the Germans are going to have leaning to the left, the Italians are going to lean to the right, because they're, you know,
Culturally, they've been predispositioned.
Yeah, exactly. But in the entire world, the Herrmann brain dominance people have found that it's almost a perfect balance.
And that's another unique thing about the tool, is that while you can look at an individual's profile, you can also put all members of a team on one profile. And then you can kind of say, like, well, while everyone coming to the team is an individual, when you put us all together, we have ourselves a whole brain. Yeah. And, you know, the benefit of all of the things that each of these brains bring to the mix.
Awesome.
So this is probably the smallest one I've ever seen. Poor Jane Doe. You know, poor Jane Doe. Hey, Joseph, in the Netherlands, what's the generic male and female? So we have John Smith and Jane Doe. So,
we have Jan Jansen.
Jan Jansen, okay. There you go. So yeah, Jane Doe and John Smith. So but anyway, yeah, this is what it ends up looking like. And Brian, you can take some basic ones online for free if you just want to get a glimpse into what's going on. I don't know how much the actual official report costs. Edie, do you know what the current charge is for, or what the professionals?
Yeah, I haven't given it for a while, but It was between $100 and $200.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And that's
It's not cheap.
no,
Yeah.
it's not cheap. It's not cheap. Okay, anywho. Yeah, just give you guys a little bit of a glimpse, but that's the little circumflex you end up with. Now, Brian, I don't think you joined us on our last call, but that's where we're talking about Gregoric's model. And this seems to resonate with what you were just saying, that you can be abstract, which is certainly more creative than concrete would be, but there's a
Right.
big difference between being sequential and random.
Right.
And so we did try to get that to map onto the change grid. And the one thing that we have most definitely, I think, settled on is that these 4 different learning styles, if you will, do not map all the way to the corners of the change grid. They are definitely in the healthier range. So inside of the red circle, and even today, I'm going to propose that these things are likely to be most true when we confine them to the green circle, the interior of the green circle. Because we know once we start stepping outside of that green circle, all kinds of life starts to happen. And that puts our learning, if you will, to the test as we go on. Okay, so what I'd like to do to kind of jump into this is to just look at some of the random diagrams that I found about Herrmann brain dominance. Some of these are official to Herrmann itself. Others, I think someone just kind of threw together for whatever their intended purposes were. But what I want to do is go through each of these, and I just want you to tell me, do you think this tends to lean upgrid, outgrid, downgrid, or ingrid? Does this resonate with more of the driver energy, the expressive energy, the analytical energy, or the whichever one I forgot?
Amiable.
Amiable, thank you so very much. Now, I will tell you that the center of this is the center of the change grid. So this is going to radiate from 6-6 and go whatever direction it happens to go. So let's go ahead and start by looking at, oh, and by the way, for this to actually overlay, whichever one you go, the easiest one for us to plot is X. Its opposite must be the opposite on the change grid as well. Otherwise, we've got things completely befuddled, and then we got problems. But here we go. So we'll take a look first at the rational self. The rational self, and Brian or whoever can tell us what do you think's going on with the brain side of things, but analyzes, quantifies, is logical, is critical, is realistic, likes numbers, knows about money, knows how things work. All right, soak in that for just a second. They're logical, analytical, fact-based, quantitative. Jump a little bit more. They know how things work. They know about money. Realistic, critical, analyzes, quantifies. It's kind of a rehash.
I'll keep quiet, right? You want people to get,
well, this is where you just want, people to kind of go, what do you guys think? Does this feel like it's more leaning towards an analytical, an expressive, an amiable, or a driver energy?
It feels analytical.
Yeah, analytical is what I'm thinking.
Leaning towards analytical. And so do you think that's more about the right brain or the left brain?
Left
brain. And do you think this is more about our more cognitive sort of functions, or is this more about limbic sorts of activity?
Cognitive.
All right. And so we'd be saying this is left upper, and lo and behold, it's on the left and the upper.
That's the cortex, prefrontal cortex. That's why it's called the executive attentional faculties, because that's where you make your decision making and those kinds of things. So you sort out after it's passed through the conflict mediator part of the brain. You sort everything out, and you can make an informed decision from there.
And so, do you guys think that? If that's leaning towards the analytical, do you think we've described someone all the way down to the danger zone, or does this feel like more of the, what I want to say, more of the natural, essential sort of activity or location on the change grid? Does that include extremes, or does that really, no, that's more the healthier?
Yeah,
that's healthier.
Healthier. All right. Now, if that's true, then let me go ahead and do this. that would mean that I'm going to put in here that this is left brain and this is more upper. So left cortex rather than limbic. Cortical, is cortical right, Brian? I always
What did you
look
say?
about limbic. What's the adjective that for upper brain? Cortical?
You can have upper and lower corticals.
Oh,
They're just
okay.
describing region, basically. So it's just the left or upper.
All right, that's the gifted students program.
And they usually call it cerebral versus
Yeah.
limbic.
They're going to call it cerebral versus
Right.
limbic. Okay, so
Limbic,
left
yeah.
Cortical
cerebral.
just refers to region.
All right. So we'll go ahead and put this. So left upper cerebral. All right. And I
Because
will
it's in the
fix it a bit later.
cerebellum parts of the brain. So cerebral is more of the characteristic of that region.
Okay, if we want an adjective, we go, they're being logical and cerebral. All right, we'll see if this holds true. Now, if that is in fact true, that would mean that by definition, the lower right has to be expressive. So let's look at this and see if that would hold true. So this little chart is saying if you're in that lower right, interpersonal, feeling-based, kinesthetic, emotional, this is the relational part of their brain, feels, talks a lot, is emotional, expressive, supportive, touches a lot, likes to teach, is sensitive to others. Yeah, we already did that. Feeling-based kinesthetic. Yeah, we touched upon that. All right, so that pretty much is the kind of the essential of what's going on. Now, I have to tell you, some of that feels amiable to me, but most of it does feel expressive to me. Do you guys agree?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
what part feels amiable to you?
The part that feels amiable to me is when I see words like is sensitive to others.
Okay.
As the expressive moves further and further up grid, I believe that sensitivity falls by the wayside. So
Okay.
to me, the amiable energy is more likely to hang on to sensitivity to others longer than the expressive energy. Is likely to that, because again, when we look at the high level of tension, that whole expressive kind of a situation, yeah, there's a whole dangerous element to the whole thing, because you can get up there if you really are in danger. But if you're not in danger, you're just really you know, enthusiastic in the life of the party and all that sort of a stuff. I promise you, you believe you're the center of the world. And that amiable energy continues to want to, you know, think about others. But do they feel? Yeah. Do they talk a lot? Are they relational? I'm going to say if they're close to the center of the change grid, yes. But as they move further and further away from the change grid, they take the spotlight with them, or from the center of the change grid, they take the spotlight with them.
So maybe this one is on a border or some sort, because as I'm thinking of lower right processes, you're talking about like the brain stem and those kinds of things that are reptilian. So they're automatic kind of responses.
And that would hold true. The further up grid we go, I believe the more our reptilian brain is what we need at that point in time. Yeah, that's why we still have it, right?
Right.
So, so I can kind of see that that would be more relational. And honestly, if we were to just look at the change grid for a second and say, well, if I am still in power and I'm in this leaning up grid, this is where a whole lot of team building comes into play, but it's more team building with a purpose rather than team building for the joy of team building. You know, and then you get up a little bit more and now they're teaming because they don't want to be the only person at the party, if you will. So this would definitely be more right-brained, and this would be more limbic. Okay, does that feel right, you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just throw the word lower in here. Now I'll fix it later. I don't need upper. We'll just do that. All right, now that leaves us with these two other possibilities. One's going to be more of an out-grid, one's going to be more in-grid. So let's take a look at, probably this one is giving us some good, our different selves. And by the way, Ryan, this is why I like this one, because what they're saying is like, look, there's not one person living inside of your head. You got a whole bunch of characters. Which Disney movie was that one all about? Was actually pretty good, where the brain was being driven by these 5, I think, different entities. Anyway, it was an animation. It was really good. Check it out. Anywho, now what we're left with is the safekeeping self and the experimental self. One of these is going to feel a bit more driver, and the other one is going to be feel a bit more amiable. Or maybe this is going to help. We know that the center of power runs through the middle of these two. So go back to this. So if I draw a horizontal line, the difference between the in-grid side of things and the out-grid side of things has a lot to do with their level of drive. The further out-grid you go, the more driven you become, and their level of comfort with risk. So on the in-grid side of things, they tend to be more risk averse. And as you move further and further out-grid, they become more and more comfortable with risk, up to the even the growth of being more, not just risk tolerant, but you seek out risks. And if you're in the danger zone, now you create risks where they don't exist, purely to, again, as I've said many times before, make things more interesting. So maybe that'll help as we go about understanding this, because I do have a couple of issues with it. So this experimental part: infers, imagines, is curious and plays, likes surprises, breaks the rules, speculates, is impulsive, and takes risks.
It sounds like driver.
There's a lot of driver energy inside of that. Certainly, I'm not hearing driven driver.
No.
The amiable driver does have a playfulness to them. So they like, I mean, to me, as you walk into the casino and you want to go, who's likely to be playing which game? I think that there's a whole lot of games designed for the amiable driver. Most of them are slot machines or look like slot machines. Because I feel like they're breaking the rules. But if you want to go out there to the driven driver, I suspect they're at the high stakes rooms, or they're, you know, at the craps table, wherever there's some real odds that could be in their favor, although we know that's doesn't happen in a casino. May the odds be always in your favor. No. And then the flip side of things, we would say the amiable energy, or the less risk-oriented energy, the more in-grid energy, plans, is timely, is neat, organizes, is reliable, gets things done, establishes procedures, takes preventative action. All right, a lot of that I think would map to the slightly in-grid leaning from the center of the change grid. Are you guys agreeing with me on this, or what do you
Yeah,
think?
no, got no disagreement yet.
So if we look up this one, organized, sequential, planned, and detailed, what I find is interesting about this is that I would have said to you that what the analytical and the amiable share is an appreciation for details. But the analytical energy appreciates details about things and situations. And the amiable energy likes details about people and interpersonal kind of activities, events. So they both like detail, but one is more detail oriented, leaning towards the people side of things, and one is more detail oriented towards the task side of things. So, and I guess I'm saying that because to me, an analytical is also organized, and an analytical energy is also sequential and planned and detailed. So, and I think that, so I guess that's the thing I'm just wondering about, is the context in which this is being experienced.
Yeah, I like that.
If that's in-grid T, that's just slight.
Right. I was
Yeah.
going to say the same thing, because with all of these, you have to think about the intensity changes the context of it in terms of how you're experiencing it, right? So that's
Absolutely.
going to be a different representation in your brain, literally.
And so this would still be more, I'm going to say it's going to be more left-brained
Hmm.
on the right. So left limbic. And this is going to be right cerebral. Okay, are we okay with this so far?
So far.
All right. So I guess I go back to wanting to look at the purpose behind the model. And maybe, Edie, this is something you can comment on. While we seem to be finding all these things about learning styles, was the Herman brain dominance model originally proposed from a learning vantage point? Was that their whole goal? Oh, Edie's not on the audio right now, but I'd be very curious to know if that's what they were trying to actually do in that model. We'd have to do a deeper dive to
See, I
find
read
out.
something
Yeah.
that said that he was assigned with trying to generate creativity with the leadership team.
Right, because yeah, you're right. And that's what I thought as well, that this is all about creativity. And we know that creativity tends to be more of a right brain function than a left brain function. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, so like automatically, well, it's more free, I guess you can say, right? Because again, the left brain can be creative. It's just going to be more organized. But if you want someone who's not biased, who's not, who can use imagination and harness it for its greatest use, that would be right then.
All right, good, good, good. And now again, oh, I didn't want to move that. I want to move this. I really do want to confine these to that interior of the green circle as much as we can, because I do think that it becomes a bit problematic when we move away from that center area. You know, and again, it's because when I say things like, well, a driver is holistic and intuitive and integrating and synthesizing. How many of you want to say, well, yeah, on a good day,
Yeah.
you know, because we know if we get out here in that driven driver, we start to get between that green and the red circle, and certainly beyond the red circle. This is not as happy as a description as it is. So I'd love to see what's the negative side of this. So again, experimental self infers, imagines, speculates, takes risks. Some of this is between the green circle and the red circle, breaks the rules, likes surprises, is curious. That's all fine, but I don't think we are describing what happens when things get out of whack. And so I go back to Brian. Brian, what do you think happens from a neurochemical perspective as we're describing this? So we have this person who really is functioning right cerebral. So, and for whatever reason, they start to move further and further out grid, more and more task focused, more and more outcome oriented.
Well, that becomes the extreme of like how the dopamine will take over. So their idea is the one that wins. And the more they get out there, start experimenting and get some kind of evidence to support whatever they're experimenting, the more that dopamine is going to tell them they are right. And so they're on page 20, wonder why everyone else is on page 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now it becomes counterintuitive in terms of putting them on a team where you're supposed to be working together.
And so that would sound to me then that in order for you to be most functional in any of these 4 quadrants we've been talking about, you need to be in more of a serotonin, I don't want to say fueled, but a serotonin rich kind of a situation.
Right, because you can think reasonably if you're in the green circle, right? So although you may naturally have a creative output that comes to you naturally, whereas on the left brain person, they could be creative, it just not might be as natural, where,
Yeah,
a right
yeah,
brain person, they, like myself, keep a vision journal, right? So I always, I'm never short of ideas.
yeah, 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 yeah.
You may
Well,
not
I
always
think
know how to express them, and that will be the problem with the right brain part, because the right brain doesn't speak in language, it speaks in pictures. So those are
right.
people, you literally hear them say, I have an idea, but they don't know how to get it out. That's where you need the left brain people.
Yeah, and they could also, because the limbic is interfering with the logic,
Mm-hmm.
that what's happening, because I see left brain as it's usually been defined and limbic as it's usually been defined as being at odds with one another.
Well, one operates a lot faster than the other, remember. So limbic system, one of the primary things is regulating emotions, but it also has like the hippocampus for long-term memory, and it operates almost 10 times faster than the cortex.
Yeah, we keep losing you, Brian. You keep disappearing. But we heard that, most of that, yeah.
Yeah, so it operates on different levels
Yeah.
of speed, and that's the problem.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of like where this is all going. Let's see if we can add another little layer to all this. And this is mostly a review for you guys about what we learned about the 4 quadrants in general. And I'm going to ask you the same sets of quiz questions that we did when you first learned your comparative human typological analysis in your ChangeWorks training. So I said, okay, we got these 4 different quadrants: upgrade, outgrade, downgrade, ingrid. 2 of these like to operate very quickly, and 2 of them like to take their time. So which 2 are more fast? Which 2 are more slow? So who's the fast? Who's the slow? You got up, down, in, and out. You pick. Who's fast? Who's slow?
Out is fast.
Out is fast.
And down and in are slow.
Down and in are slow. Up and out are fast.
Okay.
All right. So if I said 2 of these are more big picture and 2 of these are more detail oriented, who are my big picture? Who are my detail?
Out is big picture, right?
Out is big picture.
Yeah.
And who else would be big picture? Who else would be, or who would be detail oriented?
Detail oriented would be down.
Down for sure. And what do you think? Is the upgrid person more likely to be big picture or detail? And is the in-grid person more likely to be big picture or detail?
Up is big picture.
Upgrade is big and
Big.
in-grid is.
Yep. All right, we'll add this to it, because so far we've just said, well, those are both the outgrid and upgrade are more fast and big picture. So there's got to be some distinction between them, or why are there 2 of them? And then we also have the 2 down below would be slower and more detail oriented, which kind of makes sense, because if you're going to be looking at the details, it takes time. And so slower, more detail oriented. So if I said, okay, 2 of these tend to be more people oriented and 2 of these tend to be more task oriented. Who are my task? Who are my people?
In and up are people.
In and up are people, out and down are task. And so even if I go no further, and there's a whole bunch more I could throw at you, what I know is that while it is true that the people that are outgrid are fast in big picture, they're fast in big picture about the tasks at hand, about task-oriented sorts of things. Where upgrid, they are fast in big picture, but it's about people. And by the way, they consider themselves to be the star of that people show. So they become increasingly more self-oriented as their attention rises. If I look downgrid, downgrid is slower to take action, more detail oriented, but they're slow to take action and detail oriented about the tasks at hand, as opposed to the in-grid person who is slower to take action and very detail oriented about people related sorts of issues. So now we can start seeing some distinctions that are being made. So 2 of the, oh no, we'll do this. This will be the last one I'll do. One of these tends to arrive early for a meeting. One arrives exactly on time. One believes that the meeting begins when they get there. And the other one says, meeting? Was there a meeting?
Yeah.
So which one's which? Who's exactly on time? Who comes early?
Meeting, what meeting is downgrade?
Meeting, what meeting is downgrade? That's interesting, David. Because that would mean that the person downgrade gets distracted and forgets there was a meeting.
That's probably the person that says they're early.
Oh, why would anyone arrive early? Why do people arrive early for meetings?
They want to be the first one there.
For what reason?
Control the space.
Control. Oh, see, now that's a case that I hadn't really thought about, but all right, I could get maybe if I've got an agenda, I'm going to arrive early so I can choose my chair.
I would also say that that's the person with curiosity.
Person with curiosity arrives early. That's
Learn-
interesting. That's
of
interesting.
Learning and gaining information.
All right. Well, let me throw out what
That's an
we.
outgrid then.
Yeah, well, I like the way you guys are building a case for any one of those to fit anywhere.
Well, no, I'm going off of the verbiage, the words.
Yeah, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at the extremes kind of situation. So, so if I said to you, of the four energies, driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical, which one believes that it isn't possible for them to be late for a meeting because the meeting begins when they get there?
Driver.
The driver. So the driver believes that the only time schedule that means anything at all is their own time schedule. And so they're by definition, they're never late. The meetings begin when they get there. That leaves you these three other ones. Which one is more likely to completely forget that a meeting was even scheduled?
I'm thinking the end grid.
The in-grid. This is so interesting, you guys. Maybe we need to do a new series on comparative human typological analysis. Why would you guess the in-grid would completely forget that there's a meeting? Because again, remember that in-grid side of things is very detail-oriented. They take their time and they are people-oriented.
But they're detached, are they not?
You'd have to be in the center of the change grid to be detached.
I gotcha.
All right, so to me, even the word amiable should imply that they want to take care of other people. They care very much about other people. So if instead of saying they're going to arrive early, if I'd said to you, who's going to make the coffee and have the plate of cookies ready to serve?
Yeah, that's an amiable person.
Amiable.
That's the amiable energy. The amiable is the one who's probably set the room up, not for their own agenda, but to make sure the room is set. They're the ones that probably sent out the reminder to everybody. They're the one that shows up early again to make sure the coffee's made and the room's the right temperature and the technology is all working and all that kind of stuff, because they're detail oriented, very responsible about how things are impacting other people. So, and then again, as we've already said, the outgrid person kind of, comes in when and if they feel like coming in. They never forget there was a meeting. They just decide at the last minute whether they care enough to show up on time later, if at all, while we're going on. Now, who's likely to forget that there was a meeting? Now, which one is big picture, very fast?
Well, since you put it like that,
Outgrid.
now I'm at expressive.
The expressive, because the expressive tends to go wherever the excitement of the moment demands. So they're the ones that are distracted by the bright, shiny objects. They're the ones who have to stop and socialize along the way. So very much they're the ones who are kind of going like, meeting, was there a meeting? Oh, I forgot about the meeting. Oh, I knew I was supposed to do it. Talk about being, of these four, which one is the worst time manager? Upgrade, outgrade, downgrade, or ingrid? Who's really just not very good at time management? And mostly it's because they don't really value it all that much. What do you think?
Outgrid.
Well, outgrid is poor time management because they tend to be driven by whatever their agenda is, and that agenda is always changing. Where upgrid tends to be poor time management because they are prone to being distracted. They suffer from that fear of missing out. And so they're the ones that will always be late for the party, but you know, it'll be a party when they basically get there. And so I love the way that we're playing with all this, because on the one hand, we're looking at the healthier aspects of it, or the predictability aspects of it. But that leaves these people that are downgraded. And as an analytical, I am really, really good at being on time. So how many of you are the same thing? You are really, really good at being spot on, right on time.
I am.
Yeah, that's an analytical quality. That's a downgrade kind of a quality. We arrive at meetings when we need to be there, right on time. Now, if we happen to be the presenter of at the meeting, I will always be early, but
Mhm.
I am never early for a training gig or a speaking engagement because I need to be early. I arrive early because of the tension management I know I have to take care of for the meeting organizer.
Mhm.
So, because can you imagine if we walk in the door just in time to present, how freaked out did we just leave the organizer? But I'm not arriving early because I need to arrive early or because I feel compelled to do that. I'm doing it because I kind of consider it to be part of the gig. And so I'm just fulfilling a line item on my contract. And that's to make sure that I'm not a source of stress for the meeting organizer or the powers that be.
So
So,
that analytical like sees the big picture then, like outside of themselves, right?
well, they're detail oriented. And one of those details is that we got to make sure the relationship with the, again, it's task oriented. We got to make sure that our relationship with our client stays strong so that we get rehired. So it's all very calculated. It's not like we're coming at it from a caring perspective.
Got
You know, I'm speaking my personal truth. How many of you that are similar to me agree with that? You
Yes.
know, you kind of see like, okay, no, I'll be there early, not because I need to be there early, because you can point to me and say go, and I'm ready to go. So I'm okay with all that, but I do know that there is from a task-oriented, detail-oriented perspective, there is a checklist, and one of the items on that checklist is to make sure that the meeting organizer or whatever isn't stressed about me. So
Hmm,
I'll show up. I'll show
yeah,
up good and early.
this is good.
Yeah, so there's a lot to this. Okay, so now again, I just wanted to bring to your attention that these things definitely lean in particular directions, but I think as we move further and further away from the center of the change grid, all these beautiful things that we're saying don't necessarily continue to hold true. And so I'm going to share with you some of the dark side for each one of these. Now, I'm going to have to do it a little bit differently. All right, we know that this upper right is outgrid. It says the upper right expects people to be precise, to the point, that the information is there to be accurate. They expect to have the theory and logical rationales. As I go through this again, how many of you kind of feel like that gets shed as we move further and further out grid?
Mhm.
They want the proof of validity. Now I'm a little bit of an analytical driver. They like the research references. They like the textbooks. They like quantifiable numbers, data sets, problems. They like the opportunity to ask challenging questions. Again, isn't this feeling, it does feel like it's leaning outgrid, but a little bit downgrid as well. And they respect subject matter expertise. All right, but what they struggle with is expressing emotions. They struggle with having to be in the presence of what they perceive as a lack of logic. They don't like vague, imprecise concepts or ideas.
Mhm.
All right, now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, and again, if this is just too much for us to cover in the next 9 minutes, I'm okay. But how many of you kind of felt like in order for what we've just described to be really, really true, maybe I need to take these 4 in their exact relative positions and rotate this whole thing clockwise about 45 degrees. Maybe this right cerebral is right along this line. Instead of being here, maybe I need to rotate it a little bit further south. Now that would mean the rest of them rotate as well. But yeah, is that, okay, can you guys kind of
Mhm.
vibe with that? Or is that, things don't need, everyone's model doesn't have to be a strict overlay. Maybe the model overlays, but in order to make it overlay and feel more accurate, it needs to be rotated by something other than 90 or 180 degrees. Maybe this is a 45-degree rotation. So let's see if that holds true. That would also mean then that what I'm about to describe as this left cerebral analytical lean should now contain a bit more of an amiable element to it as well. Okay, so now that left cerebral would be left upper. Let me just go here for a second. Okay, now I got to go here. Okay, I'm going to read you a little bit more, and all I want you to do is tell me if you hear some more amiable energy coming into play. All right, so here goes. So this would be the, don't mind me, I'm trying to rotate the blue right. Okay, sorry. My head's kind of disconfibulated right now. Right cerebral is the experimental self. They struggle with time management and deadlines, administration and details, and a lack of flexibility. Does that feel outgrid to you guys?
Yes.
Problem with being outgrid?
Mhm.
Struggle with time management and deadlines, administration and details, and a lack of flexibility.
Mhm.
If I go down grid now to this C learner, they struggle with too much data and analysis. Oh, Edie doesn't have a right. What you're describing was upper left, not right. You're correct. Thank you. Yep. That's what I was doing. I thought I was talking about outgrid, and outgrid was blue, but outgrid, or rather the blue area is actually downgrid. I need to do this so I know what I'm looking at here, that this is blue, that this is yellow, that this right limbic is red, and that this one would therefore be the green one. All right, that's going to help me as I go about reading, because I'm looking at 2 very different model maps of humanity, if you will. All right, and so the question again is going to be, do I need to rotate it, or is it okay where it is? Anne asked how to get on. She never got info for the call, but we'll join Thursday. I can forward as well. Thank you, Edie. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. I'm going to talk about the blue learner struggles with expressing emotions, struggles with a lack of logic, struggles with vague, imprecise concepts. Can that stay where it is, or do you feel a need to rotate?
It can stay.
It can stay. If I go in grid now, this is the green. They struggle with risk, ambiguity, and unclear expectations and directions.
That can stay in grid.
That can stay. If I now go to the upgrid, the C learner, they struggle with too much data and analysis, lack of personal feedback, and a lack of participation. That would make sense.
Mhm.
And the right struggles with time management and deadlines, administration and details, and lack of flexibility. It's interesting, and the reason why this one was giving me some cause for pause is because when I think of an operations kind of person, this more amiable sort of driver energy, do you think they've got trouble with time management and deadlines?
No.
No. And administration and details?
Nope.
I mean, they might have a team that really does it, but I think it's still in the wheelhouse of their responsibility. So yeah, and this is why I kind of wanted to rotate this one a little bit because it feels like it needs to be rotated up, kind of counterclockwise. Let me read for you what the expectations are of this yellow learner. They expect fun and spontaneity, playful, surprising approaches, pictures, metaphors, and overviews, discovery of content, freedom to explore, quick pace and variety and format, an opportunity to experiment, new ideas and concepts. Does that feel like it's leaning more expressive than driver?
Yes.
And that's my issue. And it may just be that this particular chart I'm looking at is all about expectations of a learner. So I'm kind of thinking that might be in between, in which case the others have to rotate as well. So I'm going to describe the left cerebral, the blue, and you tell me if it's starting to sound a little bit drivery. Okay, so this is what the blue learner expects. Precise to the point information, theory and logical rationales, proof of validity, research references, quantifiable numbers, the opportunity to ask challenging questions, and subject matter expertise.
Hmm. Which one is that?
That is the analytical primary. The question is, did you hear enough driver expectations in order to rotate it a little bit?
A little bit.
A little bit. I don't know that I'm hearing enough. And again, how I can make peace with all this is that when I am looking at someone's little chart, and this, by the way, is used by permission from the Herman Group. So I think this is coming out of Herman itself. And they give me 8 bullet points about what someone expects and 3 about what they don't expect. Why do I think there's probably more like 18 expectations and 13 things they struggle with? You know, I know I'm looking at an incomplete set of descriptors. But nevertheless, if I just kind of look at what they're leading on, I go like, okay, look, on the surface, I think what we're looking at feels right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now getting down into that deeper idea about overlaying things. Does it need to be rotated? And if it does need to be rotated, what direction and by how many degrees? And we, by the way, have never gotten more picayune than 45 degrees as we rotate. It's like, I have a life. so there's that. So now if I look at the green, the question becomes, does the green need to rotate a little bit down grid? Does this feel a little bit analytical? So I'll tell you that they expect an organized and consistent approach, staying on track, on time. They like to complete subject chunks. They like a beginning, a middle, and an end. They like the opportunity to practice and evaluate. They like practical applications and examples, clear instructions and expectations. They don't like risk, they don't like ambiguity, and they don't like unclear expectations. So I go like, that might feel a little bit right if I rotate that one.
It still sounds very amiable.
Still sounds very amiable to me. Yep. But an analytical amiable, perhaps. And on the outgrid side of things, we wanted it to be an expressive amiable driver. So it does feel like it could rotate just a little bit. I'll ask you guys the big question in less than 60 seconds, but if I go for this one on the right, They want a little bit more hands-on learning, personal connection with the teacher and the group, some emotional involvement, a user-friendly learning experience. That starts to feel like that's leaning ever so slightly amiable,
Mhm.
right? And so I would say to you that I could in fact rotate this, but not even by a full 45 degrees, maybe 22 and a half. And now it would overlay perfectly. So I'll get to the big question. Is that worth the bother to do the rotation?
Juice
Or
isn't worth the squeeze, T.
it's just a squeeze. It's just going to pull in that tertiary kind of an energy. But I wanted to bring this to your guys' attention just so that you know, this idea about overlaying things on the change grid, it's not always as simple as just figuring out what quadrant it overlays in. That gets us most of the way there. But I just wanted you to see that if we were going to perform a full merging of the Herman brain dominance model, we have to rotate it counterclockwise by about 22 and a half degrees. And if we do that, we're good to go, because that would then move this from being along the heart line as the center to going through this expressive, um, amiable driver kind of spot. And the same thing would hold true all the way around. We just need to rotate this counterclockwise by 22 and a half degrees, and it will overlay perfectly.
But they're still within the green circle, yes?
They're all in the green circle. No mistake about that. A couple
Oh,
of the words people have thrown out might tip its toe between the green and the red.
right.
But
That's what I was asking. It sounds like the way you describe some of those is like they're on the border.
yeah, no, and that's like, I would say that if I take someone who is yellow, this outgrid kind of a learner, right cerebral, I know they struggle with time management and deadlines, administration and details, and a lack of flexibility. So I can tell you, the more rigid I become with them, the more I have them stay on schedule and obey a deadline, get the details done the way the details need to be kind of done. I can tell you right now, that's going to move them into the danger zone.
Mm.
They're going to become openly defiant and throw up both hands and leave. And similarly, this right learner, this red learner, if you will, if they don't like too much data, if I drown them in data, if I deprive them completely of personal feedback, if it's absolutely nothing but passive lecture with no opportunity to participate, I promise you that's going to stress them out in a big way.
Mhm.
So I can certainly see how these things that they talk about as struggles, if I focus on those struggles, I can easily move them off of that healthier location on the change grid and move them into a danger zone pretty quick. Like the green, if I give them a high level of risk, if I make things completely ambiguous and give them completely unclear expectations and no direction whatsoever, they're going to withdraw. They're not going to go ballistic. The person in the yellow, they're going to become openly defiant. These people are just going to dismiss this as so much nonsense and disappear into the fabric. And just to finish it all off, the people who are in this blue learning downgrade, if I make them focus on expressing their emotions and setting logic aside, and instead just get really in touch with all that non-logical stuff, and I give them all these vague kinds of things, even just describing it as this blue person, I'm kind of going like, oh no, you've just lost all credibility. And
Mhm.
I'll spend my time forced to sit in this class analyzing you and how wrong you
Mhm.
are. Yeah, don't put me in a touchy-feely classroom. I really can't do that.
I
So
actually like this. It sounds like what is his name, Herman?
Herman, yeah.
What he's trying to do with this is help people realize these sensory capacities they have and then how to best harness them. Because without that, the opposite end of the fact is they'll experience stress unknowingly.
Well,
And it's
exactly right.
sometimes it's the
Yep.
organization that does it itself, because I think I statistically read 1 out of 3 goes to physicians for stress-related medication, and 40% of them believe it comes from work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And by the way, again, going back to as Herman was developing all this, a great deal has been written about his work and how his work applies. But one of the key lessons for all of it is that if you can be in a setting where there is a balanced representation of all of these different preferences and styles, and one another is aware of each other's strengths and differences, and you're able to allow people to exercise their strengths and avoid whatever their struggles are, you've got a good situation, because now at least your group represents a whole brain. Instead of forcing every individual to be everything, or forcing someone to function from a place that is not natural and comfortable for them.
Right, like
And
a
so
one
that's what he's
size
really,
fits all kind of situation.
yeah, exactly right. And so Herman would say, look, if you're an outgrid kind of person, my language applied to his model. If you're an outgrid kind of person and you hate getting bogged down with administration, that's cool, as long as you got somebody else on your team who loves doing that kind of stuff. So know this about yourself, know this about one another, and use this as you go about building teams, establishing relationships, because it applies just as much socially as it does when we start looking at business.
Mhm.
Yep. Oh, that would be great. Maybe let all know his daughter will join us, motivates them to tune in. Yeah. So all right, so Edie, I know you're not muted right now, but I believe, and I think I'm being reminded that Edie is very much known to the Herman community. It's all based in North Carolina, and so Lake Lure, North Carolina. And so this would seem to mean that, and Edie, type it over. You mean you could invite Herman's daughter to join us on this call?
Be awesome.
Wouldn't that be beyond awesome? I will tell you that if we can arrange that, I will put an expectation on everybody who's coming to the call that we should at least spend an hour of our own time doing a little bit of background study on, oh, she wanted to be on today's call. Oh, good grief. All right, so Edie, let's see if we can get her on for Tuesday, and everybody, let's, honor the VIP guest, and let's make sure we do at least enough background reading in advance of Tuesday's call, so that we have at least a basic understanding of what the model is all about. So Herman brain dominance, HBDI, do a little study. And yeah, Edie, good idea. We'll go ahead and we'll promote this, and I'll make sure we get the information. We can't send it to her if we don't know her email address. So if you want to let us know how to reach out to her, just send it to me or Linda, and we'd love to make that happen. Okay, so thanks everybody. We will talk again next week, Tuesday, and go from there. So bye for now.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye everybody.